Hello, I'm Elise Day, and I'm here with Sam. Sam, I know that you've studied architecture in school, and so I've brought you here today because I was just wondering, in today's economy, we see empty spaces and we see abandoned buildings, and then suddenly we see a bunch of people in them, and it's a store that we want to go visit. And I know there's a process, though, that you use to get from square A to square B. And so, with your background, you probably could tell me a little bit about that.
Sure, I'd love to. The process of constructing buildings and maintaining them and using them is a huge, huge part of our economy and requires a lot of different trades and professionals, a lot of different people with different education backgrounds, different um, sizes of teams, different working conditions. The first person that initiates a real estate development or construction project is generally called the developer. And the developer can be a one person operation, or it could be a big team that's working with millions and millions of dollars from could be global investors. Their job is to identify pieces of land, existing buildings, or any type of real estate that they could go in and somehow make more valuable through the act of construction and development. So once they have that in place, once they have the land in place that they want to build on, they are going to go out and hire a team of experts. So they'll hire an architect. They're probably, depending on the project, going to have to hire a civil engineer and structural engineer. And those guys with the developer are going to come up with a scheme of how this project is going to make money for these investors. So they're going to have to calculate how much do we think the building is going to cost either to renovate or build new, or if it's a whole neighborhood, how much is it going to cost to build all the streets and infrastructure. And then from there, they're going to develop a proposal of what they think could make sense. And they're going to have to take it to a bank and see and try to procure a loan. So the bank is going to be skeptical of any ideas that they think are going to be risky that aren't proven yet. But if the bank committee decides this seems like a project that we think is going to work, the bank will then go ahead and approve a loan for it generally be anywhere from a half to three quarters of the total cost of the project. The rest the developer is going to have to come up with, either through investors or money he has himself. So then the team of designers gets to work, the architects, the engineers, and sometimes a contractor will help out with the initial stages of design too. All of those team members require 4-year, 5-year education degrees and professional licensureships. And that requires, from the architect standpoint, that's at least a 5-year degree, and then 3 to 4 years working in the field, and then a series of 7 tests to get your license. The engineers have similar requirements. That process of design through the building could take anywhere from 6 months to a year. Sometimes on smaller projects, it might be less than that. Bigger projects might be more. Varies a lot. And the size of teams varies a lot too. If you want to be, for example, I've done projects where I'm the developer and architect, but I can only do a very small project working as a team of one. Bigger projects might have architecture firms that have upwards of 100 people on it. And once the design's complete, the project can either go one of two ways. Some projects are bid out to a variety of general contractors. So they'll deliver a set of plans and they'll make it public to contractors for bidding. And then those general contractors will look at all the plans and they'll say, look at all the materials, how big everything is, what kind of doors are specified, what kind of roof, everything in it, and say, okay, I think it's going to cost me this much to build it. I will build what's in the plan for this much. And then whatever contractor comes up with the lowest price is awarded the job, and they have to build it for that much. So if they build it for less, they make that money. If they build it for more, they lose it. Generally, a general contractor does almost no work on the structure themselves, but instead they hire out all of the work to other people. The other way this could be done is through what's called a construction manager at risk delivery method, where the contractor is basically taken as part of the architects and engineers team. So they're working with the engineers and architects the whole time, and they've just said, look, I'm going to build this project for whatever it cost me with all of my subcontractors, plus a fee of 10, 15, 20%. And so once the project gets to that point, it's also going to go to, and the bid comes in, it's also going to go to the city, and the city has to approve the plans, make sure they meet all the building code requirements, all zoning requirements. So that's something the developer needs to look at when they get the land or the building that they want to develop, that the zoning requirements are going to dictate who and what can go on any given lot. So they might say you can only put this many apartment units per acre on this area. You might say you can't put any commercial on this area. Or if so, it can only be these certain uses. You can put maybe an office, but you can't put a restaurant. And so the city's going to look at the zoning, and they're going to look at the landscaping, they're going to look at the drainage, they're going to look at the building codes, accessibility for disabled people, and they're going to come back with a list of comments that the architect has to address. And once those are all addressed, the building department at the city will issue a building permit. Once that happens, a general contractor starts the construction process, and they delve all the work out to different subcontractors. Subcontractors come in, and at any given project, there might be anywhere from 15 to 40 subcontractors. You'll have someone who's going to dig the foundations and put rebar in, and you have someone who's going to come finish concrete, someone who does wood framing, someone who installs structural steel. And for every sub that's on the construction site, there's another company and another line of work that's producing stuff and materials in a factory. So they're cutting studs, or they're cutting steel or doors or hardware. And so in any project, half of the money for construction might go to labor, people who are actually out on the site, wiring the house, doing plumbing, framing the house, and half of it might go to the materials that are in the house that someone else produced elsewhere. The advantage to being in the business of producing things that can go elsewhere is while the local building economy might be really hot or really cold at any given time, that global building economy might be a little bit more steady. So even if the building economy in Oklahoma City isn't really hot, I can still ship my door hardware to China or Europe, where the economy is a little bit better. The subs generally, as the project goes forward, it requires more and more skill. So finish subs, people like tile and trim carpentry, those tend to be jobs that take more time to learn. Electrician, and thus generally are and there's fewer of them and they get higher pay. The jobs that are sort of at the beginning, they're rougher, faster, like framing and putting in windows, and those things are generally um, easier to get into, and there's less training required to be able to do the work.
Where maybe students coming out of high school aren't really sure what is required when they come on the job, but professionals will say, okay, they've got to be on time. They got to tell me if they're not coming. What are the things that they need to make sure they're going to do so they can keep their job?
Yeah, I think communication is critical in all levels, even on smaller projects, and something I always strive to be better at. It's because you're working not only with, if you're an electrician, carpenter, whatever, you're working with your own team, which could be 4 people, 5 people, but then you have to work with and around a bunch of other trades, plumbing, all the tile guy, the painter, like their timing and communication is really huge because of how many different entities are going into completing a final built product. So that's huge. Both timing and communication is huge to start off with. Attention to detail is really important for anyone in finish work. There's a lot of times that things end up taking longer because someone didn't see something, didn't do something right the first time, or tried to get something done too fast, or didn't notice something out of place until much later. Being attuned to detail and being just caring about the work, I wouldn't recommend anybody go into finish carpentry or tile if you weren't meticulous and you didn't care about like how things looked in the end. Like, you have to be the person that's notices something's off before the architect or the customer does most times, because if you notice it, it's generally easier to fix than the time it's been after it's been painted and finished and all of that. And that's how you earn a good reputation. The trades world is so much about reputation. People pay more to people that have good reputations. One thing I wouldn't let push you away is math. I think a lot of people think architecture involves a lot of math. And while it does, it's all pretty simple math. It's mostly stuff that can be done easily on a computer, or it's just division, addition, subtraction. During school, it's structures classes can be pretty math intensive, but in day-to-day practice, it's not doing a lot of calculation. It's more of understanding the principles behind math, that why things stand up and fall down. So I wouldn't let that discourage anyone from becoming an architect. I might let it discourage someone from becoming an engineer, though. One of the things that, probably the most important thing if you're interested in becoming an architect, is just having a innate desire to deal with three-dimensional building. Like, if you love making things with clay, or building with Legos, or drawing, anything like that is going to be a really good sign that you might love doing architecture.
So actually in architecture, when you design something, do you have to build a small scale of it?
Sometimes, yeah.
I mean, is
A
that
lot of
really
times.
helpful?
It is depending
It
on the
seems like
project.
so intensive to build this small scale of something.
Yeah, it can be. Sometimes you're doing that to show clients, say, here's what it's going to look like. Here's a model of what the final building will be.
Uh-huh.
And then sometimes you're doing that as an exploratory thing for yourself that you think, I build a model on a computer for every project. But sometimes I actually want to see, how does this feel physically in space? Can I build the model big enough where I can sort of imagine myself in the building a little bit better than I can just going through a computer?
Right. Uh-huh.
Um, which is the computer is still helpful, but getting a real sense of scale with your eye versus with kind of the force perspective of a camera, it's just a little bit different. So yeah, building a model can be helpful. We call that a study model when it's a model just for the architect to kind of tweak and like play with.
Right now in the
Yep.
market, if I was to go get a job, or if I wanted to get skilled, you can be, you said a plumber or welder, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe a carpenter, a skilled carpenter. Do you see a high need? Is there one particular area, like when I go to work on it, for me, a couple of houses that I flipped,
Yeah.
just cannot find an electrician. But that's in my experience, and not might even be accurate. But is there some skills that you think they can make quite a bit of money, and there's just not many skilled laborers?
Generally, um, there's a lack of tradesmen all across the board right now. We had a really bad economy building, especially in 2008, 9, 10. A lot of people left the trades and didn't come back. And then there's also been not a lot of younger people coming out of high school that have gone into trades in the last 10 years. So as the economy's picked back up and more people are building things, there's been a really severe lack of people in. Oh, it's pretty across the board as far as the lack of people in trades right now. So that means really good pay for trades generally right now, which is driving up building prices a little bit. And I think also there was a narrative that was out there that everybody needs to go to college and do a job that sits at a desk for 40 hours a week, like that's what you wanted to be. And as people in high school got pitched that narrative, less and less people wanted to go out and learn skills and become good at manipulating things in the physical world and building things. So yeah, there's a pretty big lack across the board. I don't know if I could point to one in particular that is more but all the skilled ones, all the ones that take time to learn. So plumbing, finish carpentry, um, electricians, all that.
What's the best way? Like, so if I'm coming out of high school, I think, that sounds really interesting, even if it's tiling, okay? Maybe it's air and heat, So what is the best way for me to get those skills? Just like on the job, I have to find somebody that's going to teach me?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of skills, so it's hard for me to say for sure, but I think most Votex have programs that are good in high school. But the other thing I would do is try to find the people that you think are the best at it, that are doing the best work, and go find them and make them hire you. Make them hire you. School is always a good connection place. That's when you're going to be dealing with a lot of, whether you're going to be electrician, plumber, or whatever, you're going to find a lot of connections there. So that's, while it's not as important, people don't look at the grades you got in college quite as much as they might look at the ones you got in high school for college. People are looking at what kind of work you're doing, like, and as potential employers, and that's a real school's a really good place to make connections. I mean, that worked for me. I mean, the two employers I've had since school are both former teachers I had. So also other good ways to find jobs are to just engage yourself with people in the industry, people whose work you admire. Like, go talk with them, go get coffee with them, ask their advice, just be there, be involved in stuff, and learn from them, even if they don't have a job for you. Like, they may be able to teach you something, they may know somebody else who's got a job at some point. As much as you can, surround yourself with people whose work or practice you aspire to, especially early on in your career, the better off you're going to be.